Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Fandom Zone. I know we've been away for a little while, but we're back, and we're ready to talk some Watchmen. And I'm one of your co-hosts, Charles Skaggs, back in the Fandom Zone once again after a long hiatus since we talked The Boys Season 1 in review. And of course, I'm with my fellow Fandom Zone co-host, everyone's favorite Fandom Zone co-host, Jesse Jackson. How you doing, Jesse?
I am ready. I have pulled down my mask so that we can talk clearly as we discuss a highly anticipated, somewhat, some would say controversial show on HBO.
Right. Yeah, obviously we're going to talk the Watchmen TV series that just debuted on HBO just back on October 20th, 2019. So this is the first episode. We're kind of playing a little catch up, but we talked about doing this, and so ready to talk about it. This was written by Damon Lindelof, who a lot of you know if you are a fan of the TV series Lost that aired on ABC, and also the movie Star Trek Into Darkness. He had a hand in the script of the second J.J. Abrams movie, obviously because of his connection with J.J. Abrams. And if you're a fan of the HBO series The Leftovers.
Which I am.
Which you are. I've never seen that series, but I know that Christopher Eccleston was in that series.
He's really good in this. I recommend all the seasons, though I think they stepped up their game season 2 and season 3. And it's a really well done series. I like it a lot.
Yeah. So Damon Lindelof, obviously the showrunner behind this series, behind Watchmen. And the first episode that we're going to talk about here, episode 165, it's summer and we're running out of ice. And which is a line from Oklahoma, where the wind comes sweeping down the plain.
Yes.
Directed by Nicole Castle, who, if you're a fan of the FX series The Americans, and I was,
yes.
I love that series. So she's directed a lot of episodes for that series. So perfect person to direct Watchmen, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So, all right. And this first episode, it is very controversial, but it's also very interesting. And so I'm definitely looking forward about talking about this with you.
So if you don't mind, Charles, I just want to take a couple minutes. You know, I just recently was on DJ Nick's wonderful series podcast talking about the Watchmen movie.
Happiness and Darkness.
Yes. So what is give us a little 5-minute background on your experience with the comic and with the movie.
Yeah, we can just talk about that real quick. I'm one of those people back in the 80s who actually bought the Watchmen comic as it came out.
Me too. Yes.
Every issue. I still have every issue of that series, and it's one of my most treasured series. Obviously, it's become one of the greatest comic book series ever.
Yes.
And I don't think it's too off the mark to say that. It's one of the most acclaimed comic book series ever. Since then, I've bought various trade paperbacks and hardcover collections to get really nice collections of it. But I've been a fan from day one. I don't know what it was. I think it was just seeing the house ads that DC Comics was running at the time. I thought it was kind of interesting. And of course, as I learned about it, I learned that the Watchmen characters were actually based off of the old Carlton Comics characters that DC Comics had acquired. And originally, Watchmen was proposed as a series, a story with those Carlton Comics characters. We're talking Blue Beetle, Captain Atom, The Question, and Nightshade, etc., Peacemaker, and so on. Um, but DC Comics obviously having just acquired these characters and just kind of introduced them in Crisis on Infinite Earths, wasn't quite ready to kind of already make them a mature
Right.
readers series. So they decided, okay, well, we'll just do a version of those characters. We'll kind of, loosely adapt those characters. So you have Dr. Manhattan being a substitute for Captain Atom. You have Rorschach being a substitute for the Question. You have Ozymandias being a substitute for Peter Candon Thunderbolt. You have Silk Spectre being a substitute for Nightshade, and so on. So, consequently, the story was just so fascinating to me, and I'm sure you felt the same way.
Yeah, I don't remember. I'm like you. I don't remember why I ended up picking this up, except that it was the newest thing from DC, and of course I was going to try. And as I shared on Nick's podcast, by issue 6, you're like, this is the most depressing series I've ever read, And then they, Lori and Night Owl, kind of they decide
So Silk Spectre and Night Owl.
Are going to break out Rorschach out of the prison, and you slowly get this kind of back up. And it is a series I go back to normally about once every year or so and reread.
Right.
When they talk about what would be if you could only bring 3 or 4 books into a desert island, I always pick Watchmen because it is so complicated and intense that each time you read it, I feel like you learn something new. And so absolutely.
Well, because there's so much back matter, to the stories, supplemental material. And then it's such a detailed world.
Yes.
And it's only 12 issues. And so it's kind of self-contained. You don't really need anything else.
Yeah.
And that's what helps make it a great series, I think.
And absolutely where things that you pick on your 3rd or 4th reading, you didn't pick up immediately. And I think it's a really good point you brought up, Charles, not to get in too much of this, but there is a lot of Alan Moore is very vocal about he doesn't like any adaptations of the series. He thinks it's a comic book, and that's what it should be. Yeah, it should be nothing else. And DC, being a very good business, has never let it go out of print. So they keep the rights. But I think it is, as he used the Charlton characters, other people are using characters, and that is the way the comic industry works. So it isn't like he's being treated unfairly, and he chooses not to be compensated or credit on any adaptation, but Dave Gibbons, on the other hand, does. How about the movie?
Because the artist David Gibbons obviously still associates with that. He actually had drawn some artwork for this upcoming series, so he's the one whose name still shows up in the credits.
Yes.
Alan Moore has asked not to have his name associated with it at all.
Yeah.
And everybody's just like, okay, fine, no problem. Yeah. We'll just credit Dave instead.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Real quickly, and your thoughts on the movie, and then we'll get to the first episode of this series.
Yeah, because obviously we're not going to talk about the movie. No. You just talked about it on Happiness and Darkness. Yes. The 2009 Zack Snyder movie. A lot of people I know aren't fans of it because it's Zack Snyder. Mm-hmm. I actually like the movie. I think it's as an adaptation, a film adaptation. I think it tells the story very well. The problem is, I think a lot of people feel that it's too slavish to the original source material. So it just kind of seems like a kind of almost a movie by numbers.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people had that complaint about the early Harry Potter movies.
Right,
That and I think you're in a no-win scenario when you are
right,
dealing with when you are adapting such a beloved source material. You have to be very careful because if you change it too much, you're going to get
right,
people screaming, you know,
right.
bloody murder. But if you do it too close, you go, well, you're not adding your own depth. And I think
Yeah,
as the Harry Potter movies grew up and went to different directors, I am not someone who beats up Christopher Columbus. I think the success of the series allowed them to do other things. And I think because this was so beloved, you know, Snyder had to do what he wanted to. But now then, Damon Lindelof, to get us to the series,
yeah,
has had
right,
a little bit of time, and he's been able to, okay, I'm going to use this as my source material, but I'm going to expand several years after that world and talk about what if and stories in that world.
right. When Lindelof originally released what I want to call like what a
Oh, I
manifesto,
love that. Yes.
where he's basically telling his I like this is his reasoning for doing Watchmen. He said he did. He says he really respects the original source material, and he said he views this as a remix.
Hmm.
I don't view it as a remix. What it is, despite what Lindelof says, this is a sequel set 30 years down the road
Yes.
from the now. He says the original story from Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons is sacrosanct. It's essentially the platform where this universe is based, but it's this story being set in the modern day in 2019 obviously isn't that same story. It's just continuing what happened before, kind of essentially catching us up on what's been going on in the Watchmen universe over the past 30 years since the original storyline. And
Yeah.
so I don't view it as a remix. It's a sequel. It's a sequel set 30 years down the road.
Yeah. And I will tell you, so far, I am very pleased with the series. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we're um, pulling Fandom Zone out of its
Yeah, we're
hiatus.
dusting it off.
Yes, and
Yes.
putting it together because I'm loving this so much.
Yeah.
Um,
This is something we want to talk about, and I'm really appreciative that you're willing to talk about
yeah.
this with me.
All right. So
All right.
do you have some topics for us, sir?
Yeah. Well, first I want to run down the cast really quickly
Sure.
because this is the first episode. So really quickly, obviously this new TV series stars Regina King as Detective Angela Abar, aka Sister Knight, who essentially is a vigilante working with the police force. She's actually on the essentially in this setting of 2019, the police are the vigilantes. They're the ones that have decided to mask themselves in order to protect their identities so that their loved ones can't be harmed. And Regina King is the star of the show. A lot of people may know her from a lot of different projects. I personally she hit my radar because I'm a fan of the animated series The Boondocks, and she voices the characters Riley and Huey Freeman on that show. And so, very talented actress. I know she's been in a lot of different things, but I was really intrigued by her casting, and I think from this first episode, right from the get-go, um, she's going to be under Emmy consideration. Has to be, I would think,
Absolutely. She
or
was
she
in,
should be.
yeah, she was in 24. I really liked her in Southland.
Yeah,
She has she was very good in The Leftovers.
right.
And then she plays a very funny, the HR lady in Big Bang Theory, and a very fun part on that. Yeah, so this is a really, she's a very strong lead, and I was really glad to see that she was done.
Yep. So some of the other casts, I'll just run down them really quickly so we can get into our
Yeah,
topics. Don Johnson, who plays Judd Crawford, he's really great in this episode. Obviously, a lot of people know him from playing Sonny Crockett on Miami Vice. He's been a lot of different things. Tim Blake Nelson, who plays Looking Glass, who's very enigmatic. Um, if you're a fan of the Incredible Hulk movie that came out, the one that's set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe,
Mm-hmm.
he played um, Dr. Samuel Stearns, who eventually becomes the leader, one of the Hulk's arch enemies in the comics. Um, he was in that movie, and he does a completely, I mean, he's just completely unrecognizable from the Incredible Hulk and in this role, where he's doing this drawl, serious, heavy drawl of a Tulsan accent, and it really comes through. It's a great performance by him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
go
stop
ahead.
there. He
Yeah.
comes across as kind of a little bit country, a little bit country bumpkin, but
Mhm.
that's a persona he puts on.
Right.
You know, and we're only going to be talking about episode 1, so we're not going to try to go in. But we've both seen both episodes, so that may
Yeah.
context our discussion of the characters.
Yeah, obviously we're playing catch up here, so we'll try to just focus on episode 1.
Yes.
Also, Yahya Abdul Mateen II, who you may remember recently from the Aquaman movie. He played Black Manta in the
Nice. Yes.
Aquaman movie, so that's probably where you see him. He plays Calvin Cal Abar, Angela's husband. We've got Andrew Howard as Red Scare, Jacob Ming Trent as Panda. Tom Meissen, who was recently on the TV series Sleepy Hollow, plays Mr. Phillips. Sarah Vickers as Miss Crookshanks. And then Louis Gossett Jr. as Will Reeves, a very enigmatic character we want to talk about here in a minute. And Jeremy Irons plays Adrian Veidt, Ozymandias, although at this point they're calling him Lord of the Manor. But it's already been revealed that, yep, he's Ozymandias, because of course he is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see what Adrian's been up to in the 30 years since he destroyed half of New York City and ended the nuclear war between the United States and Russia.
And I did think it was interesting.
Or prevented one, I should say.
There,
yes.
There was a line, right? There was a headline on one of the newspapers saying that he was confirmed dead, right? Veidt was confirmed dead.
Yes,
in this
yeah, that's in
episode.
the newspaper. But
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah.
You don't think
No.
Adrian Veidt could fake his death?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Music really quickly. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. I'm a big Nine Inch Nails fan, so I love Trent Reznor's music. And I love these two composers together because if you saw the film, the David Fincher film, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, you know the score was excellent in that. And also if you watch The Social Network, that they did the score for that as well.
Okay,
so
good.
they bring a lot to the table, and I'm really loving this Watchmen score they're doing. And the title, It's Summer and We're Running Out of Ice, it's a line from the Oklahoma song Poor Judd is Dead.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're wondering where that title comes from, that's where it comes from.
Nice.
All right, so let's get into our main topics. I have 3 topics, and we'll talk about them really quickly. So topic number 1, I want to talk about Sister Night, aka Angela Abar, and I want to also talk about Will Reeves in this segment because it seems like maybe the two have a little connection, or at least that's the implication here. So let's talk about Angela first and foremost, our lead character. What's your take on Sister Night?
I really liked it. We first see her when she's at either career day, I guess, Parents' Day,
Yes.
where she's
Parents'
talking
Day.
about being a baker, and she's sitting there, and I'm sure everyone else noticed when she broke the yolks, she made a smiley face.
Right. There are a lot of Watchmen Easter eggs
Yes,
in this
there
show.
is. There is.
A lot of them are very obvious, some of them not so
Right.
much.
And I thought that was really well done. The idea that, she's talking about, I quit being a policeman. I'm now retired. I run a bakery. And she's very good at the two personas. But then when she feels like she's being attacked, there's guns stationed all over her house, and she
Right.
changed into
Well, she kind of leads a double life, like a
yeah,
superhero.
she does. She absolutely does. So yeah, I was very happy with this. I thought she did a great job, and it you pull for her, which is important, right?
Right.
I mean, you have to like your lead, and you have to want her to be successful, especially in this kind of dark world where often your heroes and your villains can get very mixed up. So
Right.
I feel like she has a sense of justice, what she wants to do. She is trying to do the right things for her family and the community. So I really was impressed with her.
Yeah. Regina King is just phenomenal in this show. Um, we're introduced to her, like you said, she's essentially Topher's mom, and Topher is a son that she has two white kids,
Yes.
and we don't really get their story a little bit until the second episode, so I won't
Yes.
really get into that.
Right.
But it's kind of interesting because you have traditionally, like you have like you see white parents who adopt black kids.
Yeah.
Well, here we have two black parents who have adopted white kids.
Yes.
And so it's kind of flipping the script a little bit.
It is.
And Topher is one of the kids in this class that Angela's presenting at as a pretending, like under her daily guise as a baker. And it seems like it's going pretty well. She talks about how she used to be in the cops until she got shot during what's this event called the White Night.
Yes.
And apparently that encouraged her to quit the police force and become a baker. That's the story that she's telling everyone. Obviously, we find out that's not the case. She's still working with the police as Sister Night, her alias.
Yeah.
And like there's already some like you could see that there's a lot of racial resentment in this version of Tulsa. There's a lot of white resentment toward what they term redferations, which is a parrot, like the term reparations, where that talking about like kind of recompensating African Americans who are descended from slaves for that. In this in this universe, Robert Redford has been president since Nixon. And so he apparently instituted these reparations. And so there's this white resentment, and they nickname it Redferations. And, it's kind of become so prevalent that there's this group called the 7th Cavalry, who's a white supremacist group that adopting Rorschach's mask style. Although obviously they can't recreate the whole like swirling mask, like because they didn't have the same material. But essentially, because Rorschach was a conservative in the comics, his ideology pretty much goes right along with theirs, and then taken to that extremist view of the white supremacist.
Yeah.
So what did you make of the 7th Cavalry before we get into a little bit more?
So I thought
I'm on the subject.
Yeah, and as often is the case, a group takes what and makes it to the extreme. I do not believe that Rorschach was a racist in the comics. I think he hated everyone. I mean, he just had this
he's more of a
humanity as a whole.
More of a sociopath. Yeah. He's more of a sociopath. Yes.
And so they are taking his and kind of twisting it for their own device, which is these kind of people always do.
Yes.
I think it's an interesting play on the KKK and other kind of these kind of fringe groups,
the white supremacist groups.
So yes. I really like that a lot. They're very scary,
Right.
And they're very dangerous. I think you set that up very well at the very beginning of the episode when the police officer stops the guy and can tell, hey, I think I'm seeing this.
A black police officer,
Yeah,
we should point out. Yes.
and you get established that at this point, um, the police they are under, because of all the violence against civilians, you have to ask permission to draw your weapon. And
Right.
literally it has to be released the same way that,
Yeah, we'll talk about the
yeah,
police here in a second
okay,
segment.
good.
So
All right, good deal.
I want to say that, but
Okay.
but I appreciate where you're coming from. I didn't
Okay.
mean to cut you
No,
off, but
no, it's okay.
I thought we could save that for a second segment because I do want to talk about those. So Angela, obviously we find out, she's doing she's operating a sister night, and they're going after the 7th Cavalry because of them attacking a police officer, and you see how brutal she is. She's willing to interrogate her suspect.
Yes.
To get information. She just beats the crap out of the guy to get her info. That apparently they're holed up at this cattle farm.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that here shortly. But you kind of see that, and then you also see her relationship with Judd, who we'll talk about here in our next segment as well. She has this closeness toward him, and so it becomes this huge shock when at the end of the episode we find that Judd has been lynched.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's an interesting flip on the script, because normally it's black people lynched. Well, here's a white person lynched, and the person claiming to have lynched Judd Crawford is this old guy played by Louis Gossett Jr., who kind of shows up earlier in the episode. He's kind of hanging out outside this bakery that hasn't been opened, which is essentially the front for her sister night headquarters.
Yeah.
And he's kind of asking her interesting questions like, do you think I could lift 200 pounds? Mm-hmm. Essentially the weight of Judd Crawford.
Yeah.
And, and then later we find out he calls her up to tell her about that she should go to this oak tree to find Judd. And he asks questions like, well, hey, is your father Marcus Abar?
Mm-hmm.
So he's asking very pointed questions about her family. And so he's very enigmatic. What did you make of Will Reeves, who we found out is the kid we see at the beginning of the episode, who's this little kid that survived this Tulsa race riot?
Yeah, Lou Gossett Jr. is always a great character, and so I think having him on the show playing this elder, mysterious figure is very interesting. I can't say too much of it without going into what we've already seen.
Right.
So
right.
yeah, I was intrigued by him and really surprised that the way Judd ended up being. You know, I was like, wait a minute. Very.
What did you make of that? The intro, where we're introduced to Will as a kid.
I loved the setting up, the idea that the quote unquote hero that you're seeing in this black and white movie, the old silent movie. And
this Bass Reeves, an actual figure in history, a black lawman back in the day, which obviously was very rare.
Yeah.
And showing him, and then this kid Will Reeves. Interestingly, they have both the same last name. Is just watching in awe at this movie when all of a sudden this race riot breaks out.
Yeah.
So as someone who lives in Texas, were you familiar at all with the Tulsa race riots?
I was not. I had to look that up. I was familiar with Bass Reeves because of the scene. He was featured in an episode of Timeless, which is a great series that talks about little known historical characters. And so I had not learned that. In fact, I don't know about you, Charles, but I constantly have my phone with me as I'm
Yeah.
watching the series. Pause, Google, and so
So I can't do that. I got to watch the whole thing through,
yeah,
and then if I have questions, I kind of look them up later
I
afterwards.
yeah, I did look and see that I did not aware of this. In fact,
Yeah, I mean, this is something that hasn't really been talked about in history
no,
classes because here in Ohio, this was something that was never taught to
yeah,
me as a kid. I mean, it's
well,
something I learned later on as an adult that it happened,
yeah,
but it's something that's very, little talked about because essentially it's like, oh, hey, a bunch of white people like opened fire and attacked this rich neighborhood of black people, affluent black people, and started this huge race riot.
so we're talking. I was at lunch, my weekly lunch with a friend of the Next Stop Everywhere podcast, Ken Schaefer,
Hmm.
and Ken,
Hi, Ken.
yeah, Ken does everything um binging. Like he does not watch anything real time.
Yeah,
He's always 6 to 9 months behind because he just buys the DVD sets and watch them. And
and you're kind
so
of
I was
annoyed. You're
telling
like,
him
"Will
how
you
much I
hurry up?
was enjoying
Hurry up and watch
Watchmen,
this?" Yeah,
and he
yeah.
says, "Well, tell me a little bit about it." Yeah, so since Ken watches everything after it's already been done, he binges through DVD sets and online. He was curious about Watchmen, and I told him it's set in Tulsa, and he said, "Why Tulsa?" And I said, "Well, it turns out that at one time Tulsa was considered the Black Wall Street, and a significant racial event happened there, and so that's where they're basing it." And he said, "Oh, interesting." So I think I think it's genius of the series to set it in some place like Tulsa. I think similar to like the Leftovers, where Damon Lindelof ended up setting it in Texas, the second and third seasons. I think having this in Tulsa gives a different thought than versus, most things are always set on one of the East Coasts.
Right.
And so I like the idea that it's
Hey,
Tulsa.
you finally get something set in the South, right?
Yes, there you go. Yeah. How about you? Do you like the idea that it's set there?
It's interesting to me. I mean, it's completely unexpected. So credit to Lindelof for kind of just blowing apart expectations with that.
Yeah,
But obviously, using the 1921 race riot in Tulsa as the framework for these racial tensions that he wants to tell, and that's kind of why I think it was presented at first because it's very intriguing and it obviously makes sense, but I think it's unfortunately I think it's a lot of people are going to be turned off by that because they don't want to deal with the racial overtones and to which I think is their loss personally because I think there's this stuff like that needs to be talked about and
absolutely.
and I'm sure these people feel that they're being preached to and how woke everything is and all that ridiculous nonsense. But, God forbid people actually learn something. And if you didn't think that the original comic by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons had racial overtones and serious topics like that, serious controversial topics, you obviously need to go back and read Watchmen again because
Absolutely.
because it's all over the place.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah. So I really don't get why people are just like, oh, it's, I don't want to see that kind of stuff in my shows about comics, even if the comic book was exactly the same way, right? So
Yeah,
it's very
and
frustrating to me.
it is very
Seems very
everything,
narrow-minded,
yes, everything can't be the Super Friends.
right? And this
Not
is
that we want it to be the Super Friends,
right.
right?
Yeah, this is not a kids show. This is a show for adults. And this
Yes.
is a show on HBO, and this is where you get to drop F-bombs and see
Yeah.
naked people and whatnot. As we got to see Angela and her husband having sex that gets
Yes.
horribly interrupted by a phone call.
Yes.
Um, and just that this is for older adults or older audiences, and so therefore it's going to talk about old themes for an older
Yes.
audience. So um, I don't know. It just seems like I don't get that particular outrage, but
I don't either.
it's like the internet. There's a lot of outrage on the internet that I really just don't get personally.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right, maybe it's me. I don't know, but
Yeah.
so let's move on to Judd Crawford and the Tulsa Police, since we're on kind of that topic already. Um, Don Johnson as Judd Crawford, he's great in this episode. He's very charismatic, very likable, and we find out we're already hinted that he's got some secrets, some skeletons in his closet, as we find out almost literally, and I find him very intriguing, and he's set up in the story with the way he's lynched at the end, and the blood dripping on his police badge, a la the comedian. That little human bean juice that splatters on his smiley face badge. So obviously, this particular mystery centers around, well, hey, who killed Judd Crawford? And
Yeah,
even if you have Will Reeves saying that he did.
Yeah, I did not know. I knew very little about the series before starting.
Right.
So I was a little surprised that we lost him so early.
Right.
Especially considering how good he was.
Yeah.
He is a flawed man. They showed him doing a little cocaine, and
right.
they had to
tell
him to wipe his nose.
Kind of hint that you need to brush that off. Yeah.
And there is. But when you see him with the wife of the policeman that was shot.
Yes. Charlie Sutton's wife. Yeah.
He is so kind.
Right.
And when she says he loved you, and he goes, no, he loves me.
Right.
He is going to be fine.
Right.
I mean, you could tell.
He reassures her. Yeah.
Yeah. He cares about, he is the type of leader that cares about the people working for him and that staff.
There was that great scene around the dinner table where you had, Judd and his wife go and hang out at Angela's house. Yeah. And they kind of have this dinner together. And Judd, it's revealed that Judd was in the play Oklahoma as a younger man, and got to voice, had the role of Curly, and so he gets up and he starts singing. People will think that we're in love, or whatever that song is, and people will say we're in love. That's the song. Yeah. And so he does this great heartfelt performance, and he goes around the table. He's hugging the kids. He's hugging like Angela's husband, saying people say we're in love, and you just see this warmth, and almost like Judd and his wife are family to the A-bars.
Yeah,
and so that makes it even more shocking, obviously, to Angela when she sees his lynched body in the tree at the end.
Yeah, there is a lot of affection between them, and the 6 of them, you could tell they are an extended family.
Right.
He is, and we later found out why. Also, Frances Fisher, who plays his wife, Judd's wife, is amazing. She is so good in this role. I love seeing her.
Jane,
and, yeah, and you're right. When they're picking at him to sing, and he plays it perfect, like no, and then just started singing, and oh, what a beautiful voice Don Johnson has.
Yeah,
and it's
did that shock you?
I remember back in the Miami Vice days, he may have had, back in those days, as I sound like an old guy.
Yeah.
You would often have a TV star would record an album or a single so that it would be on the charts. And so if I remember correctly, Don Johnson may have had some light top 40 songs.
Yeah.
But it was, he was just perfect in that. That is a true high point of this first episode.
Right. And I think it just humanizes him so much. So it makes it all the more tragic when he's shown dead. and it makes you
Absolutely.
and Lindelof makes you feel that, I think, because
Yes.
hey, here's this likable character. Oh, we just killed him off. We just essentially he's the Ned Stark of Watchmen.
Yes. Yes, he is.
If that's a fair comparison.
No, I think it is perfectly perfect.
Yeah,
I
if
mean,
you're
it is exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and there's little clues like the cocaine habit. Um, there's that picture when Judd's putting on his dress uniform to go out driving, and you notice that he had promised his wife that, oh, hey, I'll have one of the guys drive me,
Yeah.
but he drives himself. And there's that kind of zoom in on this picture on his desk with who I presume is young Judd with his grandfather, who was also a cop.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll find out more about his grandfather.
Yeah. And I thought that was Charles.
Yeah.
I didn't think that is anything suspicious. I just thought the arrogance of him.
Yeah.
I also thought it was really interesting. He, while we have other people wearing, their costumes
Yes.
or uniforms, like
Right.
Lady Justice or Sister Justice.
You mean Sister
but
Knight? Yes.
yeah, Sister Knight. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why I think Lady Justice for
I don't
some
know.
reason.
Yeah, Sister Knight.
Yeah. Anyway, that his is the full uniform, and I don't show that he covers his face.
No, he
I
doesn't.
think as the
Which
leader of the police.
which is probably why he has guards around his house.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
He's
He's open. He's maybe because he's a public figure. He's the chief of police.
yeah.
That he has to kind of present. He can't hide behind the mask like the others. Maybe.
And that makes sense. I mean, that would make a lot of sense that to show that
because he's elected, I guess.
Yes,
probably.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I just loved everything about that.
Yeah.
And was really sad that I hope we get more scenes of him in flashback.
Right.
Because he was really
I'm sure.
an
I think we
interesting
will.
character. Yeah.
I think yeah, as they peel back this mystery.
Yeah.
And involving Judd and why he was killed, I think that we'll see more of him in flashback form. Now there's another great moment with him where he's addressing his fellow officers and essentially authorizing lethal force. So, all the cops are in masks except for Judd, and he basically he's kind of giving a presentation about the 7th Cavalry, showing how horrible they are with this video that they've released. And so he essentially authorizes using the weapons against them. And you had this one cop named Panda, who's this guy wearing a panda mask. That's his identity. And he pulls out this ginormous rule book. And it's kind of showing essentially like all the restrictions the cops are under these days, that they have to go through all these legal hurdles just to do their job. And and he's saying, well, you can't do this. And Judd is essentially going, nope, well, guess what? I'm doing this. It's my funeral. Obviously prophetic words there.
Well, and if you remember when the police officer, Charlie, right?
Yeah, Charlie Sutton. Yeah.
When he calls in for approval, he says, I need to talk to someone. Oh, it's Panda on call.
Yeah.
And you saw him looking disgusted,
right.
Like, oh, man.
Nobody likes Panda because they were all telling him to shut up during the meeting, and they all hate Panda.
Yeah, Panda seems to be the barracks lawyer,
right?
Or the one that he's got. Well, but the rules are, he's
that guy. So consequently, he's one of my suspects.
Yeah, there you go.
About who killed. Panda's one of my suspects about who killed Judd. Now, we should talk about, while we're on the subject of the police, we should talk really quick about Looking Glass, who's a very enigmatic character. We talked about him a little bit. But he's this guy who, he's essentially Angela's partner in the field. And he's also this guy who handles the interrogations, and what we learn is called a pod, which is essentially this chamber where a suspect is brought in, and there's all kinds of subliminal imagery flashing around to try to get the suspect to keep them from giving a false response so that they can get the truth out of them. And so what did you make of that scene in the pod with Looking Glass?
Of course,
the interrogation pod.
You have to watch it two ways. You have to watch the episode, the actual story, and then you're looking at the subliminal, flashes, imagery. Like, okay, what Easter eggs am I trying to catch here?
You saw squids and and all that. So,
and by the way, I'm sure you saw too,
right,
that in the classroom there was a anatomy of a squid,
right, and then and you had these raining squids while Angela and her son were driving home, and that's a mystery about why it's raining squids. Hallelujah.
Thank you. Yes.
It's raining squids. Hallelujah.
Yes. So I thought that was cool. It is. There is a very mixed range of technology in this world, that things are a little bit different. You aren't sure because it's not exactly like our world. There is some differences. So I thought that was a very cool way to kind of sweat out a suspect to try to get them to break and get them to confess.
Right. Yeah. And Looking Glass is studying eye dilation. And all that for truthful responses, which I'm not sure how we could see that through that mask, but okay, let's go for that.
Yeah.
Let's go with that. But Looking Glass, it almost seems like Looking Glass is essentially the Rorschach of this updated Watchmen, if you notice. Yes. He wears his mask a lot, half mask like Rorschach did when he was eating stuff or what have you. And
there is a scene that we'll talk about next week that is very reminiscent of that.
Of Rorschach, So he's obviously a character we need to pay attention to, I think.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. And so, just a lot of interesting. And we meet a lot of other cops. We meet Red Scare, who's like apparently a Russian cop, which is kind of interesting.
I don't like him as much. He seems to be a little more hot-headed-ish.
Yes.
And maybe that's the role he's supposed to do, but versus
his name's Red Scare.
Sister Night is she certainly can be dedicated and fierce when she needs to, but she seems to have this measured control.
Yeah, I like Pirate Jenny, who's played by Jessica Camacho. She's the one that essentially is Judd's co-pilot in that variant. If you notice, there was like a version of Night Owl's owl ship, Archie.
Yes.
And nickname for Archimedes. And that it's interesting that the police have kind of adopted Dan Dreiberg's Night Owl technology.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what the story is with that. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I wonder
because it's not actually Archie, but it's like a cop version of that. Yeah.
And you wonder if maybe in the future, after the series, that's one of the things he did is Dan gave that technology to people, or started a company that sold that so that you could buy a similar, made those for police officers.
Yeah.
So
we find out it's probably a good time to mention this. If you're like a fan of the original comic book series, and that they had this really cool back matter at the end of each issue.
Yeah.
Which gave you like a lot of memos and press clippings and whatnot, a lot of backstory to the actual comic book story. And so if you're one of those geeks that just love diving deep into back history, it was something that was really cool. Now the TV show is doing something very similar to that. Mm-hmm. They set up this website called Peteypedia. That's PETEYPEDIA.com. and it's like right off of the HBO. It's right off of HBO site, and what essentially is it's a microsite that it posts um, same thing like press clippings, government memos. Um, PD, the guy behind this website, is apparently an FBI agent, so we see his memos, etc. And it's set up in PDF form that you can actually download and
Nice.
save, so you can go through it at your leisure.
Hmm.
And it's just something very cool that I think is like it's almost like supplemental material for the show. So if you're curious about where a lot of why things are the way they are, you can get a lot of kind of advanced clues about why they are. Like we find out that in the one that every week they release one just after an episode airs, and in the one after episode one, they reveal that Dan Dryberg is in prison
Yeah.
because he and Lori Blake, the former Silk Spectre, were busted in the 90s. And
Oh, I had not read that yet.
yeah, so I really recommend checking out that PDpedia material. It's kind of like I know it's kind of bonus homework, but it's worth it, I think. What I've read so far is
Okay,
definitely
good.
definitely important. So I just thought I'd mention that while we're kind of
Yeah,
on the
please
subject
do.
of what happened to Dan Dryberg, the second Nine
Hmm.
Owl. All right.
Yeah.
Topic number 3. Let's move on really quickly. Um, Ozymandias, I want to talk about here. I want to talk about Mr. Phillips and Miss Crookshanks. So we
All
can talk
right.
about this one pretty quickly. But so, what was your take on Jeremy Irons as Ozymandias?
So a little bit creepy.
Yeah,
I got after a few moments, you realize that um, his servants are either clones or androids or something
we really get into
because
that in episode 2. Yeah,
yeah, but I'm trying to remember,
yeah,
and at the time you could tell they were very awkward,
yeah.
and
But
in effect, when he ate the cake, it's like it was really a bad, like
cake.
they didn't quite know how to cook.
Yeah.
So
And instead of
uh,
giving him a fork, Mr. Phillips gives him like a horseshoe. So
yes,
so they're not quite great clones. Like he's like essentially
yeah,
he's been developing cloning technology, but it's
yeah,
not perfect yet.
yeah, and that's why I wasn't sure if they were clones or if they were androids or something that
Yeah.
he's working on, but it was very clear. A great shot of him riding the horse and kind of
He's got this big estate, which is why they call him Lord of the Manor
yeah.
in the credits.
Hmm.
And but something see like if it I don't know if it's just me, but Adrian seems a little more unbalanced these days.
Yes.
Like there's something off, even more off about him. Like he doesn't seem as in command as Ozymandias in the comic books from the 80s.
No, he doesn't, and he seems obsessed. He's talking about writing. He's got this old
A play, yeah.
yeah with a manual typewriter, and
He calls it a tragedy in 5 acts titled The Watchmaker's Son,
yes,
which obviously is a reference to Dr. Manhattan's origins because Dr. Manhattan was the son of a watchmaker.
yes,
So,
yeah,
and we'll get more of that in the episode 2.
okay,
Yeah. But it's very interesting. And yeah, we'll see where they take him, but it just essentially teased him, and and Adrian talks about like, well, hey, I'm going to cast you guys in the leading role, Mr. Phillips and Miss Crookshanks, and they toast to the play's success apparently.
yeah. That was a little weird,
Yeah,
and
like he's sitting naked at a typewriter while he's typing.
yes, like why are you
So
doing that?
right. So what? So I think Adrian has essentially gone insane, even more
Yes,
insane.
I think so. I think that's a realistic thought.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens, but obviously being one of the world's smartest man is going to make him even more dangerous, I think. And
Yes, absolutely,
we'll see what happens. But I just thought we should address it. All right.
absolutely.
I'm guessing because of me kind of like apparently surprising you with this, you don't have favorite quotes.
I do not. Thank you,
So
though.
that's all right.
Please, do you have some?
I do have some. So I got four here. So I'll just run down these really
Okay, great.
quickly. I like Looking Glass, who said he was talking with Judd, and Looking Glass drawls, there was a head of lettuce in Sutton's car. Shooter must have tossed it in. I believe it was romaine. And and Judd goes, were there any croutons? And Looking Glass pauses for a moment and he goes, not that I could ascertain. So I thought that was cute.
That is great.
I like that one. Judd and Angela later on. Judd's asking, apparently Angela takes this one suspect, throws him in the trunk of her car, and Judd's asking, how do you know he's 7K, like 7th Cavalry?
Yeah.
And Angela goes, I got a nose for white supremacy, and he smells like bleach. It's a great line.
It was a great line.
Jane and Judd talking. Well, this is Jane asking Judd to kind of hurry up while he and Angela are talking just after their party. And Jane goes, hey, what are you two talking about that's taking so long? And Judd goes, oh, nothing. Just the end of the world. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock,
yes.
tick tock.
Yeah, I did like that. That was one of the lines that were
echoing the 7th Cavalry
in the review. And so, yes, it was very nice. Yes.
And then one last one where Judd and Jane are talking after Judd gets off the phone with the governor.
Mm-hmm.
Judd asks, how'd I do? And Jane said, you sounded very confident. And Judd goes, that's because, my dear, I am full of confidence. And Jane replies, yeah, I noticed some of it coming out of your nose at dinner.
Yes.
Pointing, obviously, letting him know that she noticed his little cocaine smudge around his nostril. So
yes.
Yeah. So obviously cocaine's still popular even after the 80s.
Yes.
In Tulsa. So do you have a rating?
I do.
What's your rating?
I really like this one. I thought it was off to a great start.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it 9 out of 10 beautiful mornings.
Okay. That's good. As in, oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh,
yes,
what a beautiful
it is.
Day.
Absolutely.
I caught that reference.
Thank you.
I understood that reference,
yes.
as Steve Rogers said in the Avengers.
Yeah.
So I give it just a little bit under you because I think the opening was a little, disorienting for a lot of people. I think it could have been a stronger opening. I'm going to give this one 8.5 out of 10 raining squids.
Yes, very nice.
So, yep.
Paul Schaefer's very little known follow-up to My Raining Men.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So Phantom Zone news, just really quickly, because I know we're kind of trying to hurry this up because we got another podcast right after this. I just want to talk about some quick news really quickly. The Cloak and Dagger TV series was canceled by Freeform, and the CW is developing a Superman and Lois TV series.
Yes.
Which we're both looking forward to. HBO Max is apparently developing a Strange Adventures anthology series, which is probably kind of like going to be their Twilight Zone or something to that effect. Apparently it's supposed to feature a lot of DC Universe characters. So we'll see how that plays out. Sounds intriguing, though. And apparently they're supposed to have some kind of Green Lantern related series. They didn't say specifically a Green Lantern series.
Yeah.
Something relating to that. So we'll see what comes out of that. And if you're a Pennyworth fan like yours truly, you'll be happy to know that Epix picked it up for season 2. It's a great show.
I don't have Epix. Just recently
went
through my cable bill to try to get it, and I ended up dropping Epix. But on the free weekend, I downloaded all 10 episodes and got to watch it. And so it was really well done.
It is very well done. I really I liked it a lot better than Gotham. I think it's a much stronger series than Gotham.
Yeah, and I know it's kind of supposedly set in the same world with a lot of the same, but it was a little more, it did the right balance of being a little bit strange, but also a good story, which I think Gotham was way too strange compared to the story. So, really nice mix.
I think it's just not as campy as Gotham was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so if you're not I know Pennyworth has been under a lot of people's radar, but I highly recommend it. And it sounds like you do too.
Yeah, the actor who plays Alfred, is really, really well done. It's just a really nice, almost
drama. Yeah.
yeah, James Bond prequel. He is kind of very Bondish.
Well, it's set
So
in
very
swinging
nice.
'60s London, so
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
but
cool.
it's very cool, and I really dig it. I'm glad that we're getting another season. Now, obviously, we've been out for a while, so we don't have
Yeah,
any Fandom Zone fan mail. But if you've been watching Watchmen like us, and you have one or two thoughts about it like us, why don't you share your thoughts with us? We'd love to hear them. So drop us a line at fandomzonecast@gmail.com. That's fandomzonecast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And we'd be more than happy to read your letters on the air. And otherwise, you can reach us on Twitter at FandomZoneCast on Twitter, or the Phantom Zone Podcast on Facebook, of course, or on Instagram at Phantom Zone Podcast. So plenty of ways to reach us. I hope you do, and if you enjoy what we're doing here, talking about Watchmen, please tell your friends about us. Please share us, and go to Apple Podcasts, rate and review us, because that helps people find us, and we would definitely appreciate it. Jesse, how about you?
absolutely.
How about you? Where can they
Well,
reach you?
so you can hear me once a month talk about Doctor Who with a very charming co-host. I think his name is Charles. Yes. No, Charles and I do a Doctor Who podcast called Next Stop Everywhere. I'm currently sitting in about once a month. The other 3 weeks of the month, Charles has guest companions, and we talk all old and new, classic, and everything. If it's in the Doctor Who universe, we talk about it. Charles and I also talk about the DC Universe Titans. I am a little bitter that we're going to have to keep DC United and HBO Max.
You mean DC Universe and HBO?
Yeah. I don't. And now that Apple TV, I'm just saying.
I don't think DC Universe will be around much longer. Personally,
you don't think so?
I don't think. I think it'll probably be around another year, and then it'll probably get folded.
I hope so.
That's my estimate. So I don't think it'll be that long.
Yeah, and I think
folded,
or at least should be
Max.
the offer. Yeah. But anyway, it's we talk about Titans. The second season of this has been very good. So Charles and I are talking about that on Titan Talk podcast. You can hear me talk about a little bit of everything with my buddies on How Many podcast. That's part of the Southgate Media group. And then, of course, Set Listing Bruce, the Bruce Springsteen podcast. And I am in the middle, as we record this, it's November 3rd, I took the National Podcast Posting Month Challenge, where I will be posting a new episode every day for the month of November. Now, they're going to be small episodes, but they will be a new episode every day. Charles, how about you?
I was going to say, if you got time for all those podcasts, surely you've got time to talk Watchmen, right?
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. All right. So as for me, you can reach me at Charles Skaggs on Twitter, at Charles Skaggs on Instagram. I definitely appreciate it if you did. Facebook, of course, Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio. And my blog of geeky things.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
Damn good coffee and hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here on the Phantom Zone podcast. We're talking Watchmen, we're talking Krypton, we're talking The Boys, all kinds of comic book sci-fi news, all kinds of comic book television news, news of my other podcasts I do for Southgate Media, including the aforementioned Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, and Titan Talk, the Titans podcast that I do with Jesse and assorted special guest companions. And also Ghostwood, the Twin Peaks podcast that I do with Zan Sprouse, wife of comic book artist Chris Sprouse, where I talk about all things Twin Peaks and David Lynch, etc., etc. So please check those out. If you enjoy what we do here, I'm sure you'll enjoy us on our other podcasts. So please give those a listen, and hope you enjoy them. Jesse, thank you so much for doing this with me. I know we kind of surprised you with this morning.
No. It's purely because this is the schedule I gave you. I just forgot about it.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to it. Every week we're going to talk about Watchmen.
Yeah.
We'll try to figure out a way to catch up because we are a week behind.
Right.
We'll try to make that happen. But
almost
for now,
almost 2 weeks behind, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So next time we're going to talk martial feats of Comanche horsemanship. We'll have to figure out when we're going to get episode 2 in here, but I'm sure we'll figure it out soon, and we'll get that up as soon as we can. And any other final thoughts? I'm sorry to interrupt you. I didn't mean to.
No, you are good, Charles. We are great.
All right. So everybody, thank you again for listening. I hope you enjoyed our episode 1 discussion of Watchmen, and hope you come back for episode 2. And we'll see you next time right here, the Phantom Zone podcast. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.